A very good morning. Thank you for joining us. The government is being urged to do more to help the vulnerable people as freezing temperatures take hold across Britain. The Fuel Poverty charity National Energy Action says millions of people will be left struggling to stay warm and safe at home. Cold weather payments of £25 have already been triggered in some postcodes. And with severe weather warnings in place, the National Grid has also said its margins are expected to be tighter over the coming days. Sky's Siobhan Freeman-Powell reports from a warm bank, which provides shelter for people during a cold snap.
This is usually a place of worship, but now this church in Croydon is also being used as a place for people to keep warm, offering friendship, food and free heating to those in need.
It is absolutely essential for the community, for people who are struggling, for people who don't have the resources and just want somebody to give them hope, encouragement, warmth, food, and help them to go back out and face the rest of the week.
Thousands of warm banks have been set up by councils, charities and community groups across the country. This one at Maswell Park only opened last week, concerned that many won't cope with rising energy bills alongside plummeting temperatures.
People that are having to make hard decisions really about whether they can in fact turn their heating on at home, whether they have got enough food to feed themselves or their children. People are having to make really difficult choices, and now we're having this really cold snap as well. It's only emphasised it.
And as the cold snap takes grip across the UK, cities up and down the country face similar issues. Charities are working to help families meet their very basic needs, but even their help only goes so far.
Children who grow up in low-income households, more likely to do badly at school, more likely to struggle in the jobs market when they become adults themselves, more likely to experience long-term health conditions. So poverty, living on a low income, not having the heating on, doesn't just have consequences in the here and now, but has long-term consequences for people.
Millions of people on the lowest incomes will get a £25 cold weather payment to help them get through winter. But charities warn that this can only be a short-term fix and doesn't go far enough to address the poverty likely to impact generations to come. Siobhan Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
And Sky's meteorologist Steph Gorter joins me now. Another very cold morning, Steph. What can we expect in terms of how long this cold snap's going to last?
Yes, you're certainly not wrong. It is very cold at the moment. The sun hasn't even come up here, so we've got no help with the temperatures at all at the moment. It got down to -9 last night, so that's about what it is in parts of Oxfordshire at the moment. Very cold for many of us. And this cold snap is going to last for about a week. So it does look like it's going to be pretty cold for many of us. What we'll see is subtle changes in the wind direction, and that will bring us a slight change in where the showers are. So currently, we've got a flow from the Arctic. That's why it's so cold. So in the far north of Scotland, we're seeing quite a few showers. A lot of those are turning wintry, as you might expect. But we've been watching during the night some showers just drift down the east coast as well. And in East Anglia, there's 1 or 2 snow flurries around at the moment. Those are generally going to ease, though, as the winds swing round, and instead we'll see most of the showers around the west. So we'll see them in the western parts of Scotland, the northern parts of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and down towards the northern parts of Wales as well. So that's where we'll see the showers over the next few days. By the coast, because they have picked up a bit of moisture, they'll generally be of rain, but the further inland they manage to get, the greater the chance there is that they'll turn wintry, and over any high ground at all, they're likely to be snow. So that's what we're looking at over the next few days. We're chasing the showers around the coast, and it's going to stay a bitterly cold.
OK, Steph, thank you. Christmas Post will stop today as Royal Mail workers begin a wave of strikes in the run-up to Christmas. Well, Sky's Milena Veselinovic joins me now from a picket line in central London. Morning, Milena. What are you hearing from striking mail workers down there?
morning. Well, Christmas Rail will be impacted, but workers here say they simply had no choice because the best and final offer from the Royal Mail was 9% pay rise over 18 months, but with some conditions attached. And those conditions, the workers here say, risk turning the Royal Mail into something akin of a gig economy company, something like Uber, which they say would really jeopardize the future of their workers and their families. Now, on the other hand, the Royal Mail is saying that the union is holding customers to ransom by organising this strike in the run-up to Christmas, their busiest time. They say they made what is a generous offer, but that the talks have clearly now broken down. Now, postal workers will be gathering in central London and in picket lines like this one across the country today to fight for their cause. But the Royal Mail is not the only company facing strike actions in the next few weeks. You've got rail workers, you've got university staff, nurses, driving examiners, ambulance staff, all taking part and walking out at some point over the next few weeks in what is swiftly turning into a winter of true discontent.
It certainly is. Milena, for now, thank you. Still to come on the show, as thousands of Royal Mail workers begin a series of strikes today, we will be speaking to the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, Dave Ward. That's at 7:30 this morning. Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she'll be in the studio with us just after 8 o'clock. As Russian forces shell the front line in the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine, I'll get the latest on the conflict with Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will today outline how the government plans to boost growth and competition with a major shake-up of the UK's financial sector, expected to cut red tape and replace EU regulations. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, joins me now. Rob, what can we expect from this?
Yes, so the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, in Edinburgh today, and this is being billed by the government as the biggest overhaul in decades of how financial services are regulated. In terms of what specifically it would be involve, lots of different rules will be looked at and reviewed. One of them that I think is going to be one of the main ones is around this technical thing called ring fencing that was essentially brought in after the 2008 financial crisis and forces banks to essentially legally separate off the retail part, the bit that you and I will use, from the riskier investment arms of their bank as well. That will be looked at again, and for banks that don't have so much investment activity, those obligations may well be scaled back. A lot of EU rules that came from the European Union on how financial services are regulated will also be looked at, potentially reviewed, and some of them repealed as well. I think in terms of the criticism of this, some may worry, of course, whether after what happened in 2008 and the financial crisis, it's right to loosen rules and whether that makes crises of that sort more likely again in the future. I think for the government, though, you can see multiple political boxes it's trying to tick with this, really. One is to try and show that after leaving the European Union, those freedoms can be exploited and to try and show some of the benefits, I guess, of Brexit to the financial services sector. I think another as well, when Rishi Sunak is sort of under fire for how he is going to promote growth in the economy amid an autumn statement where taxes were going up, and even though you might not hear them too vocally now, yes, concerns on the backbenches about what impact those tax rises will have, this allows him to point to another policy option, I think, that is designed to spur economic growth. That said, it may well be outweighed by some of those worries around tax rises, around the impact that will have on the economy and growth, and other concerns, of course, around cost of living and strike action, as we've been hearing more widely this morning. OK,
Rob, certainly many fiscal challenges piling up for this government. Thank you so much. Let's have a look at some of today's other headlines now. And US basketball player Brittany Griner, she's on her way home to the US after a prisoner swap with a Russian arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death. Miss Griner was arrested at a Moscow airport in February for possessing cannabis oil and was facing a 9-year prison sentence. She's expected to arrive in the United States in the coming hours. Backstreet Boys member Nick Carter is being sued for sexual battery after an alleged incident with a teenager in 2001. Court documents seen by Sky News allege that Mr. Carter invited a 17-year-old into his tour bus and forced her into performing sexual acts. His lawyer has denied the allegations. And Sakoulas, who has been handed a suspended prison sentence for causing the death of Harry Dunn by careless driving in 2017. The former US spy fled the UK just 19 days after his death, claiming diplomatic immunity. He did not return to the UK for her trial or sentencing. But Sky News caught up with Miss Sakoulas as she left her solicitor's office in Washington after appearing in court via video link.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Have you compounded their grief by delaying justice for 3 years? Is 3 years too long for this family to wait for justice? Why didn't you go to attend court in the UK?
Thank you.
The Pope has broken down during a prayer for peace in Ukraine. Pope Francis was giving a traditional prayer on Rome's famous Spanish stairs when he wept while mentioning the suffering of Ukrainians. The crowd applauded and urged him to continue praying. Labour has said it will introduce a new fast-tracking process for migrants from so-called safe countries in a bid to clear the backlog of asylum claims if it wins in the next election. The party cited Home Office figures showing that of 7,000 Albanians who made asylum claims after travelling to the UK in a small boat in June, less than 1% have had their case determined. Domestic abuse charity Hestia says it's seen a 158% increase in the number of people getting support over the past few months. They claim the cost of living crisis has made it harder for women to escape their abusers. The TSB Bank has launched an emergency flee fund to help victims leave abusive relationships. Now, the drummer of rock band The Stranglers has died at the age of 84.
Golden brown, fine temptress, through the ages she's heading.
Jet Black, whose real name was Brian John Duffy, passed away after years of ill health. He was a founder member of the group, famous for songs including Golden Brown, Always, The Sun and Peaches. To the World Cup in Qatar now, where the quarter-finals are set to get underway, with Croatia taking on Brazil this afternoon before the Netherlands play Argentina this evening. Alistair Bunkle is standing by for us in the capital, Doha. Good morning to you, Ali. What's the atmosphere like over there? The quarter-finals finally here.
Yeah, well, it's been a couple of days of quiet, really, because there's been no football for the last few days as the teams that are left still in the tournament, the 8 sides, are in sort of final practice and training ahead of their quarter-final matches. It is much quieter here than it was during the group stages, which is to be expected because so many teams have now gone home and with their fans. But the big matches do start tonight. There are no weak links left in the tournament by the time you get to the quarter-final stages. And today we see the 2 major South American teams. So, as you say, we've got Croatia against Brazil first up, 3 p.m. UK time, 6 p.m. here. Brazil looked a very, very good side in their last match, scoring 4 goals within the first half hour against South Korea. And then later on, it's Lionel Messi's Argentina who are taking on the Netherlands, which was bound to be a cracker of a match. So a lot of focus now again on the World Cup over the next 48 hours as these quarterfinals play out and the teams vie for a position in the semis.
Ali, over here, all eyes are on tomorrow. How are England preparing for their match as they face France?
Yeah, well, England again in training today. There'll be an eve of the match press conference held by Gareth Southgate and a player later on this evening here in Doha. Declan Rice, the West Ham midfielder who was a bit poorly during the week, is back in training, which is good news for England and English fans. Raheem Sterling, who of course flew back home because of a burglary at his house, he's due back in Qatar today, so we'll see whether or not because of that short break that he's had from being back home, whether or not he factors into Gareth Southgate's plans for tomorrow night. But he has been a key part in the squad, so it wouldn't be a surprise if he comes straight back into the squad. The French side as well, very well known to England. I mean, the two captains, for example, Harry Kane and Hugo Lloris, the French goalkeeper, both play at Tottenham Hotspur together. So a lot of the side know each other, know each other's games. It's going to be a very, very close match. Hard one to call, but there is a lot at stake because whoever wins goes through to the semi-finals and a route potentially to the final itself.
Absolutely. Ali, thanks so much. We'll see you later. Ali Bunkle there across developments for us at the World Cup in Doha. Well, let's go back now to our top story, the cold weather, and the warning this morning that millions of people are struggling to heat their homes as freezing weather now takes hold. Well, I'm joined by the Director of Policy at the fuel poverty charity National Energy Action, Peter Smith. A very good morning to you, Mr. Smith. Thank you for joining us. Now, we had a fairly mild autumn. We were hoping for a mild winter given the energy crisis and pressures this winter, but this cold snap is here and it's not going to be a short one. What are you hearing about what people are worried about?
Well, these are the precise conditions that we've been so concerned about in the build-up to winter. We know that millions of households are suffering from cold homes and they're impacted their physical and mental health. We know that many households are left with a desperate choice of do they ration their energy use to try and save money, much to the detriment of their physical or mental health, or do they get into unmanageable levels of debt? And despite the government assistance that's there at the moment, we know that many households are choosing a former, particularly those households with medical conditions, which can be badly exacerbated by cold homes, aren't well protected by the current support schemes, the targeted support schemes, and are at particular risk as we continue to see freezing conditions.
Now, the National Grid's weekly outlook has forecast that energy could be tight this week because of this cold snap, more people using their heating. How concerned are you about the energy supply lasting through the winter?
Well, increasingly concerned. We've known for some time that due to a lack of gas storage and just due to the amount of waste in our homes, energy waste in our homes, that the energy system will be particularly tight, especially during a cold snap. We're obviously hoping that the government, the regulator and industry themselves have prepared well for these type of scenarios. But we are hearing continued rumours that the energy system might require things like rolling shortages, and it is a real concern if we get into rota disconnections that we don't have the contingency there to support the most vulnerable people.
Now, your organisation, National Energy Action, has estimated that around 8.4 million UK households will be in fuel poverty from April next year. That's around twice what it was a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. Can you explain to us what it means to be in fuel poverty?
Yes, simply whether or not a household needs to spend a huge proportion of their income trying to stay warm and safe at home. We've seen all the sort of factors that feed into high fuel poverty levels coming true in the last year and a half, either in terms of lower incomes or flatlining incomes, soaring energy prices, and energy inefficient housing stock, which continues to be the cold man of Europe. So those factors combined mean that we're particularly exposed to seeing high levels of fuel poverty. But what is triggering that big jump up in April is the withdrawal in some instances of some of the universal support that the government is currently providing, as well as a lack of coverage of the more targeted support that they are going to be put in place. So we are going to see a big jump up almost overnight in the level of fuel poverty into next spring.
And what needs to be done to avoid this? What help do people need to catch them from falling into fuel poverty?
The package that was put in place in May by the then Chancellor and now Prime Minister was set at a level which now is far exceeded by where energy prices have got to. So even this winter, we're still calling on the government to do more, to put more money back into people's pockets or take more money off people's bills to address the immediate impact. And you can continue with that approach, and we're going to need to see a continuation of that approach to bear down on the energy costs themselves or to provide target income supplements. But really, we need to continue to roll up our sleeves on energy efficiency. One of the reasons that we're so exposed to this energy crisis is the inefficiency in our homes, which leaks heat often much quicker than we can pump it into our buildings. So we do need to look at that overriding cause.
Now, the £25 winter fuel payments a week have been triggered by the government in some postcodes this week. Is that enough? Is that enough to help people?
Well, we do welcome that support going out to people. It's vital that people have some confidence about heating their homes, particularly during this cold weather snap. But those limits have been in place for over a decade now. And in that time, we've seen energy prices double. And come April, they'll be pretty much triple what they were when that £25 limit was set. So we do need to see the government look at that. It's also the case that in some parts of the country, particularly in Scotland, those payments won't be made during the exceptional cold weather that we're facing at the moment. Those £25 payments, or sorry, a £50 payment will be made in February. So, you know, that's a long way off for some households, and we do need to see more immediate support. In addition to that, I would also say that those cold weather payments are often paid in arrears, and whilst we're experiencing a very cold snap, a prolonged cold snap at the moment, often households don't know that those payments are going to be triggered, and so they don't know upfront whether or not they can heat their homes, only retrospectively. So we do need to look at the system as well as the financial amounts.
And what would be your advice to people who are worried about this cold weather and worrying about how to pay their energy bills?
Well, first of all, if people are already in debt, then they should be contacting their supplier to try and help repay that debt in a way that doesn't stretch them to the limit financially. But overridingly, do prioritise, particularly if you've got a medical health condition, spending money on trying to keep warm. It can be decimating for your health if you are continue to live in cold conditions and do struggle with particular medical conditions. And despite energy prices being at record highs, there is some government support that's offsetting that. And if you do incur financial debt, then that isn't as bad as your health being damaged, particularly to a point where it could be fatal, or you're going to continue to see repeated hospital admissions. So we would urge people to try, despite knowing how incredibly difficult this is, to keep at least one room warm in the home if you can't achieve a full level of warmth throughout your property.
Yeah, certainly a tough winter and a tough week for many people. Peter Smith from National Energy Action, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Time now for a look at the morning's papers. And the Metro leads with Prince Harry's comments made in the highly anticipated Netflix docuseries about the Sussexes that the royals don't marry for love. The Daily Express looks at the row that has emerged over whether the royals were given a right of reply to the couple's claims. And little surprise, many of the papers leading with the same story. The Daily Mail, their headline, Palace anger at assault on the Queen's legacy. In other news, new anti-strike laws could make industrial action worse, the government has admitted. That's the claim on the front page of The Eye this morning. And the Financial Times leads with the Chancellor's plans to deregulate the financial sector in a bid to drive growth in the economy. Welcome back. She's safe and on a plane. That was the moment US President Joe Biden announced that basketball star Brittany Griner had been released from detention in Russia. The White House agreed to a prisoner swap, handing over notorious Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout, nicknamed the Merchant of Death, in exchange for the WNBA player. Ms. Griner is expected to land back in the US in the coming hours. Our US correspondent James Matthews reports.
From Russian TV, the pictures that cried freedom. This was Brittany Griner signing her release from jail. The US basketball star had been behind prison walls for 10 months, jailed in February on drugs charges. Her release was the Russian end of a prisoner exchange deal that put her on a plane home.
I'm good.
What's your mood?
Happy.
Well, are you ready for a flight?
Yes.
The flight to freedom was routed through the United Arab Emirates. These are pictures of the prisoner swap as it happened. Walking one way on the tarmac was the American. Heading in the other direction was the man dubbed the Merchant of Death. Viktor Bout is a former Soviet military officer serving a 25-year sentence in the United States for illegal arms dealing. The US president posted pictures of a phone call to welcome home Brittany Griner, an occasion to welcome her wife to the White House.
She's safe. She's on a plane. She's on her way home. After months of being unjustly detained in Russia, held under intolerable circumstances, Brittany will soon be back in the arms of her loved ones, and she should have been there all along.
As we celebrate BG being home, we do understand that there are still people out here who are enduring what I endured the last 9 months of missing tremendously their loved ones.
Brittany Griner is one of the biggest names in American news and sport, a player and a prisoner. Her Russian ordeal began in a Moscow airport when she was arrested for possessing cannabis oil in her luggage. Success in securing the release of one American is tempered by the failure to free a second. Paul Whelan was jailed in Russia in 2018 on spying charges, which he and his family refute.
I think President Biden made the right decision. His job is to protect all Americans and to care about all Americans. And it would have been wrong for him to leave behind an American when he had the ability to bring them home. And so I appreciate that he may have even waited. He may have even delayed in a hope that Paul might have been able to come home. But it was absolutely the right decision to bring Ms. Griner home.
US-Russian negotiations for prisoner release continue, not helped by the war in Ukraine. In the freedom business, it is a complicating factor. James Matthews, Sky News, Washington.
Thanks, Jackie. Now, 2 independent reports into alleged corruption at one of the UK's largest trade unions are to be handed to the police after potential criminality was discovered. Sky News understands the 2 separate inquiries into the Unite union found evidence of eye-watering overcharging on large contracts. Joe Pike has this exclusive report.
Go on your hotel and conference centre, Mr. McCluskey.
Because it's a fantastic investment, and you're the only one who's interested in that anymore.
For months, they denied there were problems.
You're doing yourself an incredible disservice as a so-called journalist with this nonsense and innuendos.
After claims of corruption at one of the UK's largest unions, Labour's biggest donor.
Well, don't get in my face then. Don't get in my way.
Len McCluskey has now retired as Unite General Secretary. There is no suggestion of wrongdoing on his part, but his successor has acted very differently. Sharon Graham rarely gives interviews, but she ran for the top job on a promise to investigate if necessary.
Obviously, if there was anything awry on that, then I would deal with that.
And she has, commissioning 2 reports which found evidence of potential criminality. They're now being handed to the police. Officers raided this building, Unite's London headquarters, in April as part of a fraud, bribery and money laundering investigation. Now police also have access to these 2 independent reports to help inform their work. And I'm told by one source they contain details of pricing and overcharging that would make your eyes bleed. One report looked into the tens of millions of pounds wasted on the union's vastly over-budget hotel and conference centre in Birmingham. The development was originally supposed to cost around £7 million, later rising to £57 million. The final cost is now north of £98 million. One contractor was found to have quoted around £90,000 for work, but was eventually paid 1.2 million, an unexplained increase of 1,300%. The Conservatives have written to Labour urging them to stop accepting money from the union and return the £750,000 the party has received since the police raid.
I look forward to the police doing their work, but the fact that Sharon Graham has done this work, has handed it over to the police, I think shows that the change that's happening in Unite the Union.
A Unite spokesperson has told Sky News the General Secretary is committed to doing all in her power to recoup any monies lost by all means necessary and holding anyone responsible to account. Whatever police do next, if these reports are right, it seems unlikely that Unite will ever be able to fully recover the millions of members' money now missing. Joe Pike, Sky News.
Let's have a look at some of the best pictures around today. And something weird and wonderful to start your Friday morning. A porcelain toilet belonging to John Lennon has been placed on show at Liverpool's Beatles Museum. Now, the loo was loaned to the museum having been bought for only £1,000 at auction. The extravagant piece featured in the singer's Berkshire home, which she shared with Yoko Ono. There you go, porcelain loo, John Lennon's. Now, this paddleboarder, clearly doesn't feel the cold, I should say. They were photographed out on the water as the sun rose over Avon Beach in Dorset. Yellow weather warnings for snow and ice are in place for parts of the country this weekend, but there is a beautiful yellow-orange sky. And could this be Britain's most festive home? This house in Bristol has been covered in 50,000 lights, including life-size Santas, snowmen and elves. Clearly not worried about energy bills in that household. And brothers Lee and Paul Brailsford spent 6 weeks turning their mum's home into a winter wonderland, something they've apparently been doing for 27 years. And it's all for charity. They've raised more than £90,000 so far. Well, certainly with houses worrying about their energy costs around the country, we do want to get your Christmas lights if you're creating beautiful scenes like that. But certainly it looks like a heck of a lot of effort to me. Now, back to one of our top stories this morning. Royal Mail workers, they're beginning a new series of strikes which could delay parcels and post in the run-up to Christmas, of course. The Communication Workers Union, which represents Royal Mail employees, says it will continue with the disruption until a settlement is agreed. Well, joining me now from the picket line in Parliament Square is the General Secretary of the CWU, Dave Ward. Thank you very much indeed for joining us again, Dave. Now, you were on this show last Thursday.
Morning, Sally.
Has anything materially changed since then?
No, nothing major. The company, we met them earlier on in the week at ACAS. We're prepared to continue to meet over the weekend. The company made some moves and then pulled them off the table around extending job security. We don't know why they did that, but they did suggest that they were willing to extend job security. Can I say, Sally, that, you know, this, as I've said on your show before, but it really is, on behalf of 115,000 postal workers, hard-working, decent people who want nothing more than to be at work. They don't want to be out on strike over Christmas and in this long-running dispute. But this really is the most brutal attack on jobs that we've seen any group of workers have to face in this country. They're seeing their jobs, their livelihood, and the service that they love providing to the public. They're seeing that being destroyed. Not because we won't agree modernisation, but because we won't agree to postal workers being sacked at the same time as the company wants to bring in self-employed drivers who have to pay for their own vans, don't have proper contracts of employment, bringing new workers on 20% less terms and conditions and retain around 11,000 agency workers, not for Christmas, but for all year round. At the same time, our members want to defend the service. Royal Mail are not modernising the service. They want to start our delivery people 3 hours later in the day. That will mean they are abandoning the AM delivery period. And we're saying that is no way that this business can survive in the future by doing that. It's the race to the bottom in a way that I don't think we've ever seen on the scale that we're seeing for decades.
Dave, we hear your message loud and clear, but just in response to what you were saying there about Royal Mail workers being sacked, a Royal Mail spokesperson did say that this is simply not true, that they'd already announced reductions in 10,000 full-time equivalent roles, that simply this is natural attrition. What would you say to that?
Well, Sally, if what I'm saying is not true, then we could write a very simple statement down now, and all the things that I've said, Royal Mail could commit to not doing those things, and we would find a way forward in this dispute. It's as simple as that. But I wouldn't believe what the company is saying, because this is a company that has taken the whole of Royal Mail into a crisis of their own making. They had £758 million profits only back in May, and within a matter of weeks they're claiming that they're losing £1 million a day. That's not due to the strikes, that's due to their own gross mismanagement of their finances. So, you know, what I'm saying to you, and every postal worker will attest to that, as to why they're out on strike today, is true. They've lost complete confidence in the leadership of Royal Mail. A handful of people are not interested in running the service that they love to provide to the public.
Let's just go over the detail, if I may, Dave. What is the pay increase currently on offer, and what is it that you're asking for?
Well, if I could put it this way, I think, first of all, I would want to say this, and I'm sure postal workers would back me up on this, is that if they offered 50% pay, but still put the same terms and conditions in front of our members wouldn't agree it. Because the simple reality is they are destroying the service. On pay, I'll come to that. The company is saying they've offered 9% over 18 months. What they've offered is 7% plus a £500 lump sum. And we have said continuously, and I'm not one for negotiating live on air, but we have said honestly and continuously, if it was a proper 9%, fully backdated, the full value of that 9% going to postal workers, and if the change was the right change for our members and, crucially, for customers and the future of this company, then we would probably find a settlement on that figure.
So what's the main sticking point here is conditions? Is it Sunday working? The Royal Mail boss, Simon Thompson, has accused he's accused union bosses, such as yourself, of resisting change. Is modernisation not needed?
Well, it depends what you call modernisation. We don't believe modernisation is destroying decent, hard-working people's jobs. We don't believe it's replacing those with people on lower terms and conditions. We don't believe it's destroying a service that has got an unrivalled reach. We deliver to 32 million addresses a day. All they want to do is turn Royal Mail into just another parcel courier company like Every. They're competing on the race to the bottom rather than competing with their natural advantage, which is a great workforce who will be out in force today at Parliament Square. Postal workers, your viewers know these people. This is not about unions not agreeing change. This is about a company who has lost its way, lost the support of the workforce, and haven't got a plan for the future other than satisfying major shareholders, most of whom don't even come from the UK.
And just before I let you go, Dave, can I just ask what other unions you've been working with to coordinate this industrial action?
Well, in actual fact, we haven't sat down and said at this stage we'll coordinate a strike, we'll call this, the other union will call that strike. But look, let me say as well, you know, we support all workers who are on strike. For us in the CWU, I think for the whole of the country at the moment, every single worker counts. I think people are just getting to a point where they're seeing businesses, the government, in the case of the railways, the nurses, teachers, not responding to very simple requests to try and treat people who treat the rest of society fairly, to do the same with their own group of workers. In our case, you know, I mean, we believe that we want to create a future for Royal Mail. We care about the customers. You could speak to any postal workers, I promise you this, and they will say that they care about the service they provide. They've got great ideas on how Royal Mail can continue to be a major contributor to the UK economy, overlaying new products, new services. You know what I think would help us here is if we actually shifted the balance of forces in the world of work. Postal workers and customers were on the board of this company and maybe many other companies around the UK. Then I think you'd get better services, better pay, better terms and conditions, and we wouldn't have the strikes that we're all unfortunately being involved in at the moment.
OK, Dave, we appreciate you joining us. Time to go and get a cup of tea and warm up. Dave Ward, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much.
TSB has today become the first bank to launch an emergency flea fund to help victims of domestic violence escape abusive relationships. It comes as new figures from the charity Hestia show that 3 in 4 women affected by domestic violence say the cost of living crisis has either prevented or made it even harder for them to leave. Well, I'm joined now by Domestic Abuse Commissioner Nicole Jacobs. Certainly a very serious story indeed. Nicole, thank you for joining us. What are you hearing?
I am hearing very much the same. You know, we know from Women's Aid England, which is, of course, one of our main bodies that represents many, many services in England, the same, which is that people are finding it much, much harder to leave if they need to. As you said, 73% telling us that they're finding it really difficult to leave their perpetrator because of these worries of a cost of living. And of course, domestic abuse is associated a part and parcel with financial abuse. So we know that victims of domestic abuse often don't have access to money that they've earned, are highly monitored in terms of day-to-day finances, and often just don't have that access to that little bit of money that can help get them away and get them to safety.
So explain, if you can, how this emergency flea fund may work.
Well, it's based on something that Women's Aid, Refuge, Surviving Economic Abuse, and others, and I have been calling government to put in place, which is a flexible funding pot for survivors who are in a crisis or victims of domestic abuse in a crisis who need to get from point A to point B, or really have that encouragement that it's even possible during this cost of living crisis to leave their abuser. So TSB amazingly has stepped in for its customers and have said that they will set up that type of a fund for its customers. So I think it represents a huge step forward. It shows us it's possible and that it's needed. That's very, very clear by the evidence. And we need to see this go further and have the government really step up and do the same for, of course, the vast majority of victims of domestic abuse who are facing a daunting winter ahead of them.
And Nicole, just briefly, if someone is watching and experiencing abuse, what's your advice to them?
My advice is absolutely there's help available. Please reach out. We have our national helplines. You will have websites in your own area. As Hestia, who partners with TSB, has pointed out, there's TSB branch and locations, pharmacies that offer safe spaces. There's increasingly safe spaces online, web chats. There's all sorts
Nicole
of
Jacobs, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.